Commander Zekthar stood on the bridge of his warship and looked at the small blue planet below. Earth, they called it. It's just another simple world with weak creatures that would be easy to defeat. He had done this many times before. 17 star systems had fallen to his mighty Vorthok empire. Not one battle had been lost under his command. His body was huge compared to most living things in the galaxy. 9 feet tall, with thick armor plates covering his skin like a natural shield. 6 sharp arms could move faster than most eyes could see. Each arm ended in claws that could cut through metal like soft butter. The Vorthok were born for war. They had spent thousands of years making themselves perfect killers. The reports about Earth made Zekthar almost laugh. These humans still used old weapons that shot small metal pieces. They had simple bombs made with chemicals. Their ships could not even leave their own solar system properly. Most funny of all, they fought each other more than they worked together. Hundreds of different countries all doing different things. "Sir, the fleet is ready to begin the attack," said his second-in-command. 12 massive warships floated in space around Earth. Each ship could destroy entire continents with their powerful weapons. Zekthar had used much smaller forces to conquer stronger enemies. "This will be finished in 3 days," Zekthar told his crew. "Maybe less. These soft pink creatures will surrender as soon as they see our power." He had fought the Zeridians. Who could read minds and know his thoughts before he had them? He had beaten the Morphins, who could change their shape to look like anything. The Nexus Collective had been machines that never got tired and never felt fear. All of them had fallen to Vorthok's strength and smart battle plans. Humans would be even easier. The first attacks went exactly as planned. Human military bases disappeared under plasma fire. Their flying machines fell from the sky like broken toys. Cities burned as Vorthok ground forces landed. Everything was going perfectly until something strange happened. Instead of fighting back or surrendering, the humans ran away. They left their cities and went into mountains and forests. Zekthar watched the reports with confusion. This was not how wars worked. When an enemy was stronger, you either fought hard to defend your important places, or you gave up to save lives. "They are afraid," said one of his officers. "They know they cannot win, so they run like scared animals." Zekthar nodded, but felt something was not right. In all his battles, running enemies tried to get as far away as possible. These humans were not running very far. They stayed close enough to watch, like they were waiting for something. "Send ground forces to hunt them down," he ordered. "We will finish this quickly." Captain Jake Morrison crouched behind a large rock and watched the alien soldiers march through the valley below. His Marine unit had been waiting for 3 days. The aliens were tall and scary-looking, but they walked in straight lines, like they were marching in a parade. They did not watch the hills around them very carefully. "Remember the plan," Jake whispered. To his men, "Hit them hard and fast, then disappear. Make them think we are everywhere." The aliens had better weapons and armor, but Jake had something they did not understand. He had fought in Iraq and Afghanistan against enemies who also had worse weapons. He knew that the side with better guns did not always win. Sometimes the side that wanted to win more was stronger. When the aliens reached the middle of the valley, Jake gave the signal. Explosions came from all directions. Hidden bombs blew up under alien feet. Bullets came from caves and trees. Aliens tried to shoot back, but they could not see where the attacks were coming from. In less than 10 minutes, 20 alien soldiers were dead. Jake's unit had lost no one. By the time alien flying ships arrived to help, the humans were gone. They had melted back into the mountains like ghosts. Zekthar stared at the battle report with growing anger. A small group of humans with simple weapons had killed 20 of his best soldiers. His troops had all the advantages, but somehow they had been beaten. "Send more soldiers," he ordered, "and use the big guns this time." But the same thing kept happening. Human fighters would appear, attack quickly, and disappear. They used the land itself as a weapon. They knew every cave and trail. They could hide where Vorthok soldiers could not follow. The worst part was how the humans fought. Zekthar had seen brave enemies before, but this was different. When one human soldier was hurt, others would risk their lives to save him. When they were surrounded and should surrender, they kept fighting until everyone was dead. Lisa Carter was driving a truck full of medical supplies when alien soldiers stopped her convoy. She was just a nurse, not a fighter. But when she saw the aliens setting up to attack a school full of children, she made a choice that no Vorthok could understand. She turned her truck around and drove straight at the alien weapons. The truck was full of oxygen tanks for wounded soldiers. When the aliens shot at her, everything exploded. Lisa died instantly, but she took 12 alien soldiers with her. The children in the school lived. Zekthar read this report 3 times. A non-fighting human had chosen to die to save young ones that were not even her own children. This made no sense. In Vorthok society, only the strongest survived. Weak individuals did not matter, but humans seemed to think every life mattered. They would fight and die for strangers. It protected the weak instead of leaving them behind. This was not logical. This was not how intelligent species behaved. As the days passed, more reports came in. Human resistance was growing stronger, not weaker. They were learning to use captured Vorthok weapons. They were talking to each other across the planet and sharing information. Worst of all, they seemed to be enjoying the fight. When a human prisoner was brought to his ship, Zekthar decided to ask questions himself. The prisoner was a young female named Kelly, who'd been captured after destroying 3 Vorthok vehicles. With homemade bombs? Why do you keep fighting? Zekthar asked her. You cannot win. We are stronger. Kelly looked up at him with bright green eyes that showed no fear. You don't get it, do you? We're not fighting to win. We're fighting because it's who we are. That makes no sense, Zekthar said. Kelly smiled. That's why you're going to lose. For the first time in his long military career, Commander Zekthar felt something he had never felt before. A cold feeling in his chest that he did not understand. These humans were different from every enemy he had faced. They did not fight like logical creatures trying to survive. They fought like something else entirely. 3 months had passed since the invasion began. 3 months that should have been 3 days. Commander Zekthar stood in his private room staring at maps of Earth that made no sense anymore. Red marks showed where his forces controlled territory. Blue marks showed human resistance. The blue marks were everywhere. Sleep would not come to him anymore. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw human faces. The young female Kelly with her strange green eyes. The nurse Lisa, who had chosen death over surrender. Captain Morrison, who fought like the mountains themselves, had come alive. Zekthar walked to his computer and pulled up the battle reports again. He had read them hundreds of times but still could not understand what he was seeing. Human soldiers who should have died kept fighting with missing arms and legs. Human civilians turned into fighters overnight. Children threw rocks at his war. Machines like they thought they could actually hurt them. The worst part was how they learned. Within weeks, humans had figured out how to use captured Vorthok weapons. They took apart his technology and built new things with it. They shared information faster than his intelligence teams could track. Sir, we have captured another human leader, his aide reported from the door. Bring her to the interrogation room, Zekthar said. He had learned more about humans from talking to prisoners than from all his military reports. Dr. Alina Rodriguez sat calmly in the metal chair as Zekthar entered the room. She was older than most human fighters, with gray hair and wrinkles around her eyes. Her uniform said she was some kind of scientist, not a soldier. You study living creatures, Zekthar said, reading from her file. Why were you with fighters? Because someone needs to document what you're doing, Elena answered. Her voice was steady and unafraid. Someone needs to remember. Remember what? That we never gave up. That we fought you with everything we had. Zekthar sat down across from her. Your species fascinates me. You fight wars against each other constantly. Your history is nothing but violence and death. Yet, when we arrive, you work together like one organism. Lena smiled sadly. You brought us together. Congratulations. Explain to me why your people do not surrender when they are clearly beaten. Because we're not beaten until we're all dead, Alina said simply. And even then, the idea of us keeps fighting. Ideas cannot hold weapons, can't they? Alina leaned forward. Let me tell you about a man named Pete Harris. Did you hear what happened in Chicago? Zekthar had heard. Lieutenant Colonel Pete Harris had held impossible positions for 18 hours while surrounded by Vorthok forces. His unit should have been destroyed in minutes. Instead, they had coordinated attacks across 3 different continents while fighting for their lives. Harris knew he was going to die, Elena continued. But he also knew that every minute he kept your attention was another minute for other humans to prepare. So he fought. Not to win, but to buy time for others. This is not logical behavior. Logic isn't everything, Elena said. You want to understand humans? Here's the truth. We're stubborn, we're angry, and we really, really don't like bullies. That word again. Zekthar had heard it from several human prisoners. Bullies. It seemed to be one of the worst things a human could call someone. Your people will all die if you keep fighting, he told Elena. Maybe, but we'll take a lot of you with us, and other species will see what happened here. Will know that the mighty Vorthok Empire can be hurt. After Elena was taken back to her cell, Zekthar found himself studying human culture files. His science teams had been collecting information about human society and behavior. What he read made his confusion worse. Humans had something called heroes. These were people who did brave things, often dying to save others. They told stories about these heroes to their children. They built monuments to remember them. They named places after them. But the strangest thing was that humans seemed to think anyone could be a hero. It's not just the strongest or smartest, but ordinary people who made the right choice at the right moment, like Staff Sergeant Amy Fuste. The security footage still made Zekthar's claws twitch with anger. Foster was a small human female who should not have been able to threaten anyone. She had used damaged equipment and clever planning to get inside his command ship, not to kill him, but to plant a virus in his computers. While his security teams searched for her, Foster had broadcast something called music throughout his entire fleet. Human voices singing words about hope and forgiveness. The sound had been beautiful and terrible at the same time. When they finally caught her, Foster had smiled at him and said, "Hope you enjoyed the concert, ugly." The virus had taken days too, completely removed from his systems. But worse than the technical damage was what it represented. One small human had walked into the heart of Vorthok. Military power and made them all look foolish. Zekthar called up more files. He read about human wars throughout history. They fought each other with incredible violence. But they also had something called rules of war. They tried to protect civilians and prisoners. They helped wounded enemies. They rebuilt countries. They had defeated. This made no sense at all. The Vorthok way was simple. You conquered, or you were conquered. The strong ruled, and the weak served. There was no room for mercy or second chances, but humans seemed to think differently. They had concepts his translators struggled with. Words like sacrifice, compassion, and hope that did not exist in Vorthok language. A new report arrived on his desk. Captain Morrison's unit had been busy again. They had destroyed a supply convoy using nothing but captured equipment and clever planning. But the strange part was what happened afterward. Morrison's people had provided medical care too. Wounded Vorthok soldiers. They had given them food and water before releasing them with a message. For Zekthar, the message was simple. We don't want to kill you. We just want you to leave. Zekthar stared at those words for a long time. Every other species he had conquered fought for survival or revenge. Humans seemed to be fighting for something else entirely. They fought for the right to exist as they chose. His communication system beeped with an urgent message from the High Command. His superiors wanted to know why the conquest was taking so long. They demanded explanations for the casualty reports that showed humans achieving impossible kill ratios. How could he explain that he was fighting an enemy that grew stronger through suffering? How could he tell them that humans seemed to view his invasion not as conquest, but as a test of their character? In the darkness of his room, Zekthar replayed recordings of human fighters. He watched them charge into plasma fire to save wounded friends. He saw them use their own bodies as shields for others. He observed them fighting with broken weapons and shattered bones. Sleep would not come. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard that human music echoing through his ship. He heard Elena's words about ideas that kept fighting even after bodies died. He saw Amy Foster's fearless smile as she told him about hope. For the first time in his military career, Commander Zekthar was beginning to understand that some enemies could not be conquered. They could only be destroyed completely or left. Alone, the question that kept him awake was which choice would destroy him first. 6 months after the invasion began, Commander Zekthar received an angry message from Vorthok High Command. The military leaders back home could not understand what was happening on Earth. They demanded answers he could not give. How is a primitive species holding off our greatest fleet, Commander? The message asked. Your casualty reports make no sense. Explain these impossible numbers immediately. Zekthar stared at the numbers on his screen. Humans with old weapons were killing his soldiers at rates that broke every rule of warfare. The math said this could not happen, but it kept happening anyway. His latest headache was Colonel Rick Sullivan and his armor division. Sullivan had taken normal human vehicles and turned them into weapons that could destroy Vorthok warships. Cars and trucks that should have been no threat to military equipment were somehow winning battles. The worst incident happened near what humans called Denver. Sullivan's forces had used school buses filled with explosives to destroy 4 heavy cruisers, school buses. Vehicles meant to carry children to learning centers had become weapons that defeated advanced military technology. Zekthar watched the battle recordings again. Human soldiers drove straight into plasma cannon fire. They used their vehicles as shields while other humans fired rockets from hidden positions. When their machines were destroyed, they kept fighting on foot with whatever weapons they could find. Sir, we have new intelligence on human resistance networks, his aide reported. The report made Zekthar's claws dig into his desk. The humans had connected their entire planet using simple communication systems. They shared information, coordinated attacks, and moved supplies through networks as best. Intelligence officers could not fully map. At the center of many networks was a human named Danny Brooks. Military records said Brooks had died twice in major battles, but somehow he kept appearing in new locations to cause trouble. Find this Brooks, Zekthar ordered. I want him captured alive. It took 3 weeks and significant resources, but they finally cornered Brooks in the ruins of what had been Seattle. When they brought him to the command ship, Zekthar was surprised by what he saw. Brooks was not a large or impressive human. He looked tired and hurt, with bandages covering old wounds. So you're the famous Danny Brooks, Zekthar said. You're the bug who thought humans would be easy prey. Brooks replied with a smile that showed no fear. Your resistance networks are impressive. Tell me how they work. Am I planning to copy our homework? Zekthar did not understand the reference. I want to understand how you coordinate activities across your entire planet. Simple, Brooks said. We talk to each other. Revolutionary concept, I know. You use children and elderly humans? In your operations, this violates rules of warfare. You invaded our planet and started killing civilians. What rules are those exactly? This conversation was not going as planned. Zekthar tried a different approach. You've been declared dead multiple times. How do you keep escaping? Because I'm not the only Danny Brooks. We're all Danny Brooks now. Cut off one head, 10 more appear. Basic human Hydra tactics. Hydra. Old Earth legend. Monster that grew new heads when you cut one off. Point is, killing me won't stop anything. Might actually make things worse for you. As if summoned by Brooks' words, alarms began blaring. Throughout the ship, emergency reports flooded in. Every major Vorthok installation on Earth was under simultaneous attack. Supply depots exploded. Communication towers fell. Landing platforms were destroyed by precisely placed charges. Impossible, Zekthar said. You are here. You could not coordinate this. Shh. Brooks smiled wider. I wasn't coordinating anything. Was the distraction. Hope you enjoyed our little chat, because while you were focused on catching me, about 50,000 of my friends were getting into position. The attacks continued for 6 hours. When they finally ended, Vorthok forces on Earth had lost 30% of their operational capacity. Medical facilities, weapons storage, communication networks, all hit at exactly the right moments to cause maximum damage. How? Zekthar demanded. You still don't get it, Brooks said. This isn't about military tactics or superior technology. This is about every human on this planet deciding you don't belong here. Farmers, teachers, shopkeepers, kids barely old enough to drive. They all became soldiers because you gave them no choice. Zekthar studied the battle reports with growing horror. The attacks had included humans as young as 16 and as old as 70. Civilians had turned into fighters overnight. People who should have been hiding were making bombs and gathering intelligence. One report particularly disturbed him. Human female named Nancy Kim had held a defensive position alone for 6 hours after her entire unit was killed. Damaged rifle and limited ammunition. She had prevented Vorthok forces from reaching evacuating civilians. When reinforcements finally found her, Kim was unconscious from blood loss, but still gripping her weapon. Medical scans showed she should have died hours earlier, but somehow she had kept fighting. Zekthar asked the question out loud in his empty room. Why do they keep fighting when logic says they should stop? He called up more files on human behavior. His science teams had been studying captured humans for months, trying to understand their psychology. The reports painted a picture of a species that defied all normal patterns. Humans formed emotional bonds with strangers. They would risk their lives for people they had never met. They seemed to believe that some things were more important than individual survival. The concept made no sense to Vorthok thinking. In their society, only genetic relatives mattered. You fought for your clan and no one else. Weakness was eliminated, not protected, but humans protected their weak. They carried wounded soldiers from battlefields instead of leaving them to die. They shared food with hungry enemies. They rebuilt destroyed cities instead of simply moving to new locations. A new report arrived that made Zekthar's exhaustion worse. Human resistance was spreading beyond Earth. Somehow humans had made contact with other species in nearby systems. They were sharing their technology and tactical knowledge with anyone willing to listen. The report included intercepted communications that chilled him. Humans were calling their campaign the Never Again Protocol. They seemed determined to ensure no other species would face extinction alone. Sir, his aide said carefully, High Command is demanding a status report. Zekthar looked at his tired reflection in the dark window. In 6 months of fighting, humans had done something no enemy had ever accomplished. They had made him doubt everything he believed about warfare and conquest. Tell High Command we are facing unexpected resistance, he said finally. Sir, they want specific details about our withdrawal timeline. Withdrawal? Zekthar said. Word like it tasted bitter. Sir, with respect, we cannot sustain these casualty rates indefinitely. Our forces are requesting permission to use planet-killing weapons. The thought of destroying Earth entirely had occurred to Zekthar many times. It would solve his immediate problem. It would also create a larger one. Every species in the galaxy would see that the mighty Vorthok Empire needed to destroy entire planets to win wars. More importantly, something deep in his mind rebelled against the idea. These humans, with their strange concepts of honor and sacrifice, had changed something in him. The idea of killing them all felt wrong in a way he could not explain. No planet killers, he said quietly. Prepare the fleet for withdrawal. Zaid stared at him in shock. Sir, you heard me. We are leaving Earth. For the first time in Vorthok history, they were retreating from a weaker enemy. As Zekthar signed the withdrawal orders, he wondered if he would ever sleep peacefully again. 2 years had passed since the withdrawal from Earth. Commander. Zekthar now commanded a small research station in a distant star system, far from the glory of conquest fleets. The Vorthok High Command had called his retreat a strategic postponement. In official reports, but everyone knew the truth. They had run from a primitive species that refused to be conquered. Sleep still would not come to him. In the quiet darkness of his station quarters, Zekthar saw the same human faces that had haunted him for months. Captain Morrison with his grim determination. Dr. Rodriguez with her calm defiance. Danny Brooks with his knowing smile. Staff Sergeant Foster, who had walked into his command ship like she owned it. The nightmares were always the same. He would close his eyes and hear that human music echoing through his ship. Voices singing about grace and redemption while his most advanced military technology failed against creatures with simple weapons and impossible courage. His computer chimed with new intelligence reports from across the galaxy. These reports were what truly kept him awake at night. Humans had not forgotten about the invasion. They had spent 2 years learning everything they could about Vorthok technology from the equipment left behind, Earth's military. Capabilities were advancing faster than anyone thought possible. Human engineers had somehow figured out how to build their own plasma weapons. Their ships could now travel between star systems. Most disturbing of all, they were making friends with other species throughout the galaxy. "Sir, we have interrogated the prisoner as requested," his aide reported. Agent Vera Nash had been captured in the Centauri system while gathering intelligence on Vorthok military movements. She was a human spy, proof that Earth was now actively watching his people across multiple star systems. Zekthar entered the holding cell where Nash waited. She was a small, human female with dark hair and eyes that seemed to see everything. Even captured and alone, she showed no fear. "Agent Nash," Zekthar said, sitting across from her. "You are very far from Earth. Not far enough, apparently." Nash replied with a slight smile. "What is this never-again protocol we keep hearing about?" Nash studied his face carefully before answering. "It's exactly what it sounds like. We've decided that no species should ever face extinction alone again. You are making alliances. We're making friends. There's a difference. Explain this difference." Nash leaned back in her chair. "Alliances are about mutual benefit. Friendship is about caring what happens to others, even when it doesn't help you. That is inefficient, maybe, but it's also human." Zekthar pulled up a datapad with intelligence reports. "You have shared military technology with 17 different species. You are training their forces in human combat tactics. Why?" "Because someone taught us that the universe has bullies in it," Nash said, looking directly at him. "We decided to do something about that." The word bully again seemed to mean more to humans than just someone who was stronger. It carried emotional weight that Zekthar still did not fully understand. "Your species was nearly conquered," he said. "Most survivors would focus on rebuilding, not on helping strangers." "Most species aren't human," Nash said simply. "We have this weird habit of getting angry when people pick on others. You cannot protect everyone. Watch us." Those 2 words sent a chill through Zekthar's body. He had heard that same confidence from every human he had encountered. They genuinely believed they could do impossible things, and somehow they kept proving themselves right. After Nash was returned to her cell, Zekthar accessed the latest intelligence files. What he read confirmed his worst fears. Humans were not just building their own military. They were creating something new in the galaxy. Species that had never worked together before were now sharing technology and resources. The aggressive Krylon had signed peace treaties with their ancient enemies. The nomadic wanderer fleets were setting up permanent bases to help coordinate defense networks. Even the mysterious shadow folk had made contact with human diplomats. All because humans had shown them something different. Instead of conquering or being conquered, there was a third option. You could stand together and refuse to let anyone be picked on alone. The reports included intercepted communications between human commanders and their new allies. The language was strange to Vorthok ears. Words like friendship, cooperation, and mutual respect appeared in military documents. Humans seemed to think that armies could be built on caring about each other instead of just following orders. More disturbing were the psychological profiles his intelligence teams had developed. Humans were not just teaching other species new weapons and tactics. They were teaching them to think differently about warfare itself. Traditional military doctrine said you fought to win. Human doctrine said you fought to protect. Traditional thinking said the strong should rule the weak. Human thinking said the strong should help the weak become stronger. These ideas were spreading like a virus through the galaxy. Species that had accepted Vorthok dominance for centuries were suddenly asking uncomfortable questions. Why should the strong automatically rule? What if there was a better way to organize society? Priority message arrived from Vorthok High Command. Reconnaissance ships had detected human military vessels in 12 different star systems. Earth was no longer isolated. They were actively patrolling trade routes and responding to distress calls from any species that asked for help. The message: demanded that Zekthar provide recommendations for dealing with this human problem. Before it spread further, he stared at the request for hours. How could he explain what he had learned on Earth? How could he tell the High Command that humans were not really the problem at all? The problem was that humans had shown the galaxy something the Vorthok Empire could not fight. They had shown that strength could be used to protect instead of conquer. That power could lift others up instead of pushing them down. That courage could be about standing up for strangers instead of just surviving. These ideas could not be destroyed with plasma cannons or conquered with superior technology. You could kill humans, but you could not kill what they represented. Other species had learned from them and would carry their lessons forward in his darkest moments. Zekthar wondered if the humans were coming for the Vorthok Empire itself. It's not for revenge or conquest, but for something far more terrifying. They might come to offer the same protection to his people that they had shown to others. The thought that humanity might someday try to save their former enemies was more frightening than any threat of destruction. Humans did not just defeat their enemies, they tried to turn them into friends. Late at night, when exhaustion finally forced his eyes to close, Zekthar dreamed of human voices singing that haunting song. He dreamed of Captain Morrison standing guard over fallen comrades. He dreamed of Lisa Carter choosing to die for children she had never met. He dreamed of Amy Foster walking fearlessly into the heart of enemy territory. Most terrifying of all, he dreamed of a galaxy where every species had learned to fight like humans, where everyone protected everyone else, where the strong helped the weak instead of ruling them. Commander Zekthar had faced many species in his long military career. He had conquered star systems and destroyed fleets, but only humans had left. Him unable to sleep, they had shown him something his own species lacked and could never understand. The power to fight not just for survival, but for principles that mattered more than life itself. The human invasion of Earth had ended in Vorthok withdrawal, but the real invasion was just beginning. Humanity was conquering the galaxy not through force, but through example. They were not taking territory, they were taking hearts and minds. And Commander Zekthar, veteran of 17 successful campaigns, spent his sleepless nights wondering if perhaps that was the most dangerous conquest of all.